And for us in higher education and post-secondary, I think this was very meaningful. So we will start the meeting again, as always, by me reading the statement. I talked to Penny earlier and she said that I could volunteer if anyone else wanted to help me read this statement. I will throw it out there, but if not, I will take on this challenge for the very last time if I have no volunteers. Penny, I think I don't have any volunteers. So, the Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. Conversations on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in the new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula. So welcome, welcome, welcome. This is our official call to order. I will do roll call at this time. Russ?
Good morning. Here.
Emily? David? Chrissy?
Here.
Commissioner McCord?
I'm here.
Claude?
Present.
Logan? Lauren? Senator Hensley? Representative Darby? And Gordon Ferguson. Okay, well, today is going to be a meeting for discussion. I will tell you that our recommendations, our final recommendations have been submitted, and Penny has taken care of all of that. So we have finalized those efforts, and they are going forward to the committee. Today's topic of discussion will be on policies, and this is just a general discussion. I am going to then now turn it over to Penny, and she is going to walk us through this process.
Good morning, and I want to say too, before the end of the call, I have learned so much by facilitating these subcommittee meetings and getting to know all of you, and I hope to see you as we journey on our career. The steering committee met with the commissioner last week, at the beginning of last week, and I think I shared with all of you the link to that recording and that PowerPoint that was used. The subcommittee asked that the steering committee asked that all the subcommittees take a look at some of the policies and give your thoughts around this. They'd like to have what you think. These policies that you see on the screen are not specific to higher ed and post-secondary. These are in general, but you can make them specific. The subcommittee I facilitated yesterday gave some general thoughts, and then they also added some specific brainstorming ideas to this. And so that's
Hey,
what this
Penny?
is. This, pardon me?
Could you make it bigger, please?
Sure. This is not a formal recommendation. Is that better?
Yes, perfect, thanks.
This is not a formal recommendation from the Higher Ed and Post-Secondary Subcommittee. These are just thoughts and opinions from you all to give the steering committee something else to think about. So I thought what I would do is give you a minute to look at the policy on the left and then the feedback that the steering committee is asking. I'll let you read this slide, and if there's anything in this one that you would like to comment on, feel free to do that, and I will record that and share that with the commissioner, and she'll give it to the steering committee.
Penny, can I ask a question about teacher salaries, just out of curiosity? So are they basically paid, for lack of a better word, like, cost of living? Do they get those increases? So if you are a teacher and you start at, whatever the base salary is for, I guess the district would decide that. Some education maybe comes into play in that formula, I'm thinking. And then is it you're rewarded for longevity? Obviously, I understand if you get a new position, but if you're a 25-year teacher, like, what's the difference between your starting salary and your 25-year salary? And do you know what goes into that?
No, I'm not sure how that is figured by the state or formula, but I do know that local districts give those increases for education or number of years. But I'm not sure exactly how the teacher salary goes is figured into the formula.
So does the state provide some sort of like rubric, or is that totally like a local decision on teacher salaries?
As far as I know, that's a total local decision. In the Northwest and Southwest, I know that there's a big difference in a lot of the districts that I support. You have Lake County, who is one of our distressed counties.
I've been there more times than I can count.
Yeah,
actually,
it's
so
right
familiar.
Right next door to Dyersburg City. And Albine County, and it's completely different pay scale, and so it's based on location and district.
So this policy would then set a rubric, or just increase the pot?
No, just not necessarily either one. This is just considerations that you would like for them to think about as they set these policies about teacher salaries. And all of the recommendations, I can't remember if your subcommittee listed teacher salaries as something that was most definitely recommended by you, but I do know that it was in a couple of the other subcommittees that I facilitated, and these are just in general from all 18 subcommittees.
Thank you.
And some of the other, Russ, Claude, or Commissioner McCord, you all may have better ideas, more information about the teacher salaries and how that's figured.
My only frame of reference is being married to a public school teacher. I do think, Chrissy, years ago, they no longer gave the automatic increases for certain higher education levels, like the ed specialist. There was an automatic increase. I think they did away with that. I do think most counties still graduate salaries based on years of experience. I think that's common, but they just set locally. And the cost of living adjustment, if it's sort of a function of the state salary policy, the K-12 folks are usually included in that. So if the state were to have, say, the 4% salary increase like last year, they're included in that. I think the locals can go beyond that, of course, but that's not a guaranteed thing like it is in some other states. So That's about all I know.
That's a lot more than I know. So good answer.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to mention is that there is a local option that they can do a little bit more. And that's why I think you see the disparity between Metro Nashville and Rutherford County, Williamson County. They all get paid differently on that. Now, and Russ is right. They did away, I think, with the automatic on the master's acquisition, but it does seem to me that the salary structures still do include higher education attainment for teachers in that salary bump. So it's, and I don't know if that's a local decision or not, but like I know that the framework is different between Williamson and Rutherford County for sure. So, one question I had, and I'm sorry, Chris, are you done on the salary piece?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, I having 3 kids in public school, like the weight on teachers right now. I mean, I know it's not anything we ever talked about, and it feels sort of outside our scope on some level, but is it outside our scope? It is something to think about, because my middle schooler, for example, I send like his teachers like notes like once a week saying like, this has to be like so hard. So anyway, I'm glad someone's thinking about it.
Well, that's neat that you're doing that, because I know teachers don't get many thanks. They get more complaints than anything. But, if we don't do something on the salary side, I will say from a higher education perspective, we cannot recruit highly qualified individuals to go into the teaching profession. We just can't do it. And largely because their other salary options far outpace what we're doing in the education sphere. And, we really need to, a lot of times we use the excuse that, you're in the classroom because it's your calling. And that may be true, but that's not an excuse to pay people poor salaries. And, from a higher ed perspective, we get criticized that, 1, we don't have enough people in the pipeline, and 2, that a lot of people in the pipeline are not of the quality that they want. And I'm sorry, but the salary prospects kind of help create that. We'll put it this way, it at least exacerbates it for sure. So something does need to be done on the salary piece.
Agree.
And I think I will speak a little bit on CTE because I hold that dear to my heart. I would like to see secondary work along with post-secondary to align those CTE options, so students are able to get much more benefit from taking courses than just it being a course or a certification. So it's tied to industry need, industry demand, and creating that highly skilled workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and follow up with that, the policy outcome there in terms of what outcomes for middle school, as we think about CT and all these options, I think that they need to be in there. But from a middle school standpoint, Penny, I was going to ask you, how aggressively are we using work keys at that level? Because I think primarily what we want to do is make sure that a middle school outcome is where there's at least some exposure to these students. They have an awareness of higher education possibilities, job possibilities, and you just start to get those gears really rolling about, so what would you really like to do, when you're done, and based on what you'd like to do, all right, well, what are those goals that you need to set and accomplishments you need to attain in order to hit that goal? And but do you know how they're using work keys in that sense?
I don't specifically know that. I do know in our work through CORE, CTE consultants are focusing on middle school exploration and working specifically with districts in partnership to bring all of the CTE content down to middle school. So I know that the Northwest and Southwest CTE consultants have 6 to 7 partnerships with districts, and those districts have agreed to create an exposure for those middle schools. Now, how they're doing that is it's flexible, but there is a focus on that right now.
Penny, I want to speak to the tutoring and the K-2 weight on this sheet. And I guess the tutoring question is, should there be funding included for legally required support? I think the answer would be obviously yes, but more importantly, the spirit of that, I think the state ought to pull out every stop to ensure that in that K through 3 grades that students are as on track as possible. I mean, every problem we lament in middle and high school is downstream from problems that emerge and really solidify in K through 3. And so anything that could be done there, I think that's where the state ought to be pushing most of its chips, because problems that we deal with when they're junior or senior are much harder to solve, much more expensive to solve, and it's almost too late at that point. And so I'd attack them earlier with as much sort of firepower as possible. So anything in that K through 3 area that state policy and the formula could focus on, I would emphatically support.
I'm going to piggyback off that, because maybe in the last 2 months, I have learned that there is a state kindergarten assessment, but no district chooses to use that assessment. So you do wonder if there could be a carrot in the formula for those who utilize the kindergarten assessment to help those students who, upon completion of the assessment need some additional help. It blows my mind. I know we're like anti-test, but it does blow my mind that school districts don't want to know like a benchmark on where they are with students when they start K. I mean, to your point, Russ, if we're really not starting to test students till 3, like we've lost a lot of time. And I know teachers, I've heard from teachers in Knox County specifically that are creating their own kindergarten assessment to give to students so that they have a sense of where their classroom would be. So I don't know if that's direct. I mean, again, I sort of think about it as, could we provide direct funding in the formula as an incentive for districts to actually utilize this assessment if we don't want to mandate it as something all have to use?
I definitely agree with that. I've heard that teachers do a lot of things independently to help their students that doesn't go across the board where others can see. So anything that we can do to make it seen by more and make it more structured, I think that'd be great for students, especially K through 2.
I will say that TDOE has an initiative, the Tennessee All-Core Initiative, currently, that is high dosage, low ratio tutoring. And I think we have about 79 districts that are participating in that. It's a 1-to-3 ratio using high quality instructional material. That's one of the things that I'm charged with right now, is going into those early adopter or early implementation districts to see the program. And I was in a district yesterday, and they actually started in January. It's a K-12 initiative, but what I've only seen about 6 or 7 K-5 schools, K to 5. But the students who are participating in the high dosage, low ratio Tennessee All-Core yesterday in a specific district had doubled their benchmark test. So it's absolutely working. So I just wanted to share that TDOE does have that initiative out there right now. And this is, I believe this is being funded, their guidelines, and this is being funded for them. And I believe it's for this year and next year. And I will say this too, most districts have benchmark assessments, maybe not a standardized assessment for K1 and 2, but they do have benchmark assessments so that they will know how their students are doing and how they're progressing and what they need to do to help them succeed.
So any further comments on policies that are before us? I think we still had accountability, reporting, and funding year.
So let's, on the accountability piece, I think from our subcommittee particularly, I think, accountability is maybe a little stronger term. There are certain things I definitely think we need to be tracking. I think we want to see improvement in the reduction of the need of remediation, right? For college readiness here, right? I think too, we want to see an uptick in taking advantage of any type of, EPSO, any type of early post-secondary, opportunities, like, and that could be, so that'd be dual enrollment, that'd be anything that leads into, uptick in AP exams, IB, all of those things. And again, I hate to use the word accountability because I don't want, no one needs to be punished, for these things, but I think that's what we need to be striving for. And we need to definitely be moving people on. But seemed to me, and if there's any way that we could, and I don't know how you could even measure just, again, kind of from the workforce counselor piece, just awareness of job opportunities and then requirements to get those jobs, so students need to not only know what's out there, but they need to know how can they get it, and what's a pathway to get those types of jobs. So, and I know that's all kind of abstract and kind of thrown out there, but I would think from a college readiness standpoint, we want to see a reduction in the number of students that have to have remediation. We want to see students taking advantage of those EPSOs. Does that sound generally agreeable?
It does to me.
I agree as well.
I captured that.
Penny in the.
It's kind of one of those things where you want to be able to identify best practices. So it's almost capturing the higher performing districts in schools, and then how can you create a format to share those best practices so that others can. And I realize that eventually you get into incentive funding and those types of things. That's all fine. Again, I don't think we're wanting to punish anybody. We're wanting to have people aspire to these goals. But sorry, Russ, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. And I was going to flip a little bit to the reporting policy, and this is probably not germane to either this committee or the formula writ large, but regarding what information should be included in public reporting for schools. But thinking about the state's P20 system and what uses it could be deploying, and it's not. There's so much information about the performance in both post-secondary and the labor market of a district's students and graduates that we have the ability to see as a state that we choose not to. And this is a bit of a soapbox, but again, just want to put a plug in for that we have the ability to know a lot more than we do. And again, that's not a formula issue, that's a P20 issue. But if that's the question they're asking, I think we ought to make clear to lawmakers that there's more we could know that we just right now don't.
And so, Russ, how would you like for me to state that?
Yeah, probably what it's stricken from the record, honestly. It's really, it's probably, I think I would just advocate for as much transparency as possible in student outcomes across the K-12 higher ed labor market spectrum. I think that answers the question without unnecessarily trying to draw P20 into the debate here, even though that is the remedy, but transparency about student outcomes and performance, I think, is the point that I would encourage us to make.
So I would come alongside, I guess what I would say, and add one phrase to it, Russ, make use of available data too, because it's there.
Yep, perfect.
And we don't necessarily have to call out the name P20, but it's there, and if we really want it, we can see it. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
You know, and Joe, really nothing is keeping us from looking at it right now. There's no policy out there prohibiting a lot of this. I mean, we could, if somebody had the time and had the concept framework, could begin to put together some dashboards. We've talked about that in P20 for years, you know, about what are the appropriate dashboards. It could happen.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
we've got
somebody, I'm sorry, Russ, somebody needs to be in charge of that, Claude. But when you have everybody in charge, nobody's in charge.
Exactly.
And that's what the problem is. It's organizational, and it's just the will to do it, and put somebody in charge and have a P20 czar or something. I don't know, but so I think that's it in a nutshell.
I second that, Commissioner. We need a P20 czar, 100%, someone that wakes up every day and thinks about these sorts of things. To Claude and Russ's point, the capacity is there. Well, I don't know if the human capacity is there. I think that's a big question mark for me. But the capacity is there. Is the willingness there to like do the work on a consistent basis?
Well, it is, you know, the governing board are the commissioners, and I sit on that only because we're a major stakeholder in the data that goes into the thing. But you're right. There needs to be, it's staffed up in terms of being able to, you know, evaluate the data request, make sure that the data stakeholders have approved the request. All the perfunctory things are in there, but there's no conceptual vision, if you will, for it. And that's right. I don't know if I like the term czar. It sounds so Putinish to me.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. P20 super person or something. I don't know. King.
Marvel superhero
Emperor.
Data guy.
Emperor, maybe. I don't know.
All right. That's
I like data superhero. I like that. Russ, you could probably be the data superhero.
I think he already is the data superhero.
I agree.
I think all you have to do is change the
That's a point, Russ. Russ. Yeah. Did you capture that, Penny?
I think that.
Yeah, it's carries. The motion carries.
I'm capturing all of it, Russ.
Well, yeah, the problem is TBR they're not a data stakeholder because it goes through TIAC.
Exactly. Yeah, we get the worst of both worlds. We use it heavily. You got to go through all that rigmarole, and they get no voice at the table. It's the worst.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I'm improving your requests on a regular basis from our perspective.
So, hey, Russ, that sounds like a good origin story for a superhero. Yeah. So you got your origin story. You got that sounds like it to me. So
we're struck here, aren't we? Yeah.
He's got kind of a Spider-Man red outfit on today, so sorry, that's going too far.
Better. It's getting better.
Yeah, get that out of the minutes completely. Nothing on the record for this.
Well, I think
Commissioner should know that Russ has volunteered.
Yes, most definite. And I know Logan has joined the call, and someone else joined the call that's on the phone.
Hey there, it's David Mansuri. I'm sorry I'm late this morning. Great to
Hey, David. We want to introduce you to our new infamous, well, Russ has a new title, and we'll have everyone share what that new title is. So we're talking about policy. Any other comments or recommendations that we would like to put forward?
Should we put back in all the stuff from Mansuri we struck because he wasn't on the meeting?
That's what I get, Claude. That's what I get for being late.
Well, we'll keep it. We'll keep it this time. He was just a
So
few
let me
minutes.
throw out a kind of a crazy idea, you know, and again, it doesn't directly relate here to this. I don't think it can be, but you know, I was thinking, you know, the FAFSA is such a pain in the neck for everybody that has to fill it out, and I get that, but it's an absolute requirement, right? It's something we got to. How come we can't integrate that into? It needs to be right. Junior and high school. Junior and high school can apply for aid. You know, it's prior year income. You can eventually start, you know, applying for aid early on. You can get estimates even, but why is that? Why is that not a part of a math class or a personal finance class or something that you actually? Because you get to deal with tax documents, you got to read tax documents, even if you're not using your parents' actual information, that might have them kind of flip out. But I'm just trying to think of the, you know, how much of that could we just not make it a part of? It's a part of our everyday life. Anybody who chooses the college path is going to fill out the FAFSA for 4 times, right? And obviously, unless they change it radically, they're going to reduce some of the questions, but unless they change it radically to totally automate it, it's going to be a part of the reality of who we are. But, you know, we've got that, and we've got Tennessee Promise. I know a lot of high schools are requiring seniors to fill out the Tennessee Promise application. And I think that's fine. I'm wondering how they do that in the classroom situation. Where do they plug that in? And if they're plugging that in, why can't we plug in the free application for federal student aid as a part of, you know, how do you keep a checking book? How do you, you know, those life skills that we put up there. But anyway, that's, I know, way out in left field, but I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Well,
I'm sad that you think that's in left field, because I actually included that in my like type up to Penny. I couldn't get the Google Doc to work, so I did actually include that, Claude. I'm glad you brought it up as part of something I would like for us to think about as FAFSA completion. I mean, I didn't go so far as thinking about like junior year, how to integrate into curriculum, but I do think every kid should have access to what dollars could be available to them should they choose a route to post-secondary. And how do we either incentivize schools to really focus on that? As someone who wakes up every day and looks at our statewide FAFSA numbers by high school, this is my everyday life and now has been extended an additional month. The schools where we have a high poverty rate are also the schools that have a low completion rate in FAFSA. So, you know, what that tells me just from, you know, doing this for the last 14 years is that, number one, we're just leaving like millions of dollars on the table as a state in federal Pell money. But these kids just don't know that I mean, even with Promise and this idea of a free community and technical college, they just don't understand that they could have, you know, funds to go to Logan School. I mean, I think the FAFSA is critical. I mean, I don't mind saying this on the record. 3 years ago, I went and asked the state board to consider it as a graduation requirement, not to penalize kids, but just to make it like part of that high school culture. Obviously, you could have an opt-out, but I'd love to see it in the formula as something at least to incentivize schools to really focus on.
And I would agree with that, and I would add another section to it. It needs a new overhaul as far as how students see it so they can understand it and complete it. I think we lose a lot of students just because they have to complete a FAFSA and they see that as a barrier, especially for those that are in distressed counties that don't understand higher ed. We toss out FAFSA like that's common language, like everyone knows what a FAFSA is. So I think a complete overhaul and make it more simplistic, tying it to, and it has been streamlined over the years, I do agree, but I think we could do a better job of making it easier for our students and parents to complete.
Well, yeah, but we don't control that. That's the federal government. But we certainly can make the messaging more clear. I think absolutely. You know, and the feds, you know, we're grateful to Senator Alexander for his push on this for many, many years. and the FAFSA simplification legislation has been passed and is slowly being implemented over time. But and also the reality is that it's easier the next time up. A re-app is a lot easier than your initial application. But now I think we're at 99% of the FAFSAs are completed online anyway, so we could work together. We could definitely simplify the messaging, and I think that's an absolute must for sure.
I will say this, I know this would be interesting to you all because it was fascinating for me. I also facilitate the Student Engagement Subcommittee, and they are a powerhouse of student-led organizations. These are presidents and leaders of those groups. And one of the things they put, I just looked back in my notes, one of the things they put in their recommendations under additional funding was financial literacy class. And so that would be, and all of you students are gifted students who appreciate the fact that they have that this FAFSA is a way of life. So I have another call with them tomorrow, and I would love to share that with them because these are movers and shakers who are going to be leading us. And so I would love to, and it's incredible because they share these ideas with their teachers and their administrations. And so I think that's a fabulous idea that I can share with them tomorrow and on their call, on their final call too. So thank you for that idea.
I've got a couple questions about, and I certainly support Claude, Chris is talking about on the FAFSA. How does a kid apply for lunch, for that free and reduced lunch? What do they do to do that? And then what's the language that we use for the state and the ACT and students taking the ACT? What are the requirements? There seem to be some requirements that I'm not sure what they are at the secondary level for the ACT, for taking the ACT.
So Dr. Hampton, are you asking what the requirements are for free and reduced, or how they are given that opportunity?
On the first question is, how does a student apply for free and reduced? How do they get it? How do they get in that we're applying again for Upward Bound. I'm just amazed that the percent of African-American students who are on free and reduced lunch in the areas that we partner with. But then it's just lunacy in my mind that then those students, between the time that they graduate, Claude, in May, and they get here in August, or actually July, they have to prove again that they are poor when they've been on free and reduced lunch. And so I'm just trying to figure out how do they get on the free and reduced lunch? And then isn't there some requirement? Do we pay for a retake or something of the ACT? There's something that we as a state do regarding assisting and helping students with ACT, and I just don't remember what all that is.
Yeah, what I know on that is that the free and reduced lunch is basically through the Department of Welfare, and once they qualify for it, that has been one change to the FAFSA that should be taking place here, if it hasn't already, is going to this next year. If you qualify for another means-tested qualification like free or reduced lunch, then you do not have to fill out the majority of the FAFSA. Once you indicate on the FAFSA that the skip logic on the online FAFSAs eliminates almost all the questions after you click that you receive free and reduced lunches, and it makes you eligible for the full Pell Grant. So it has accelerated, and we've been recommending this for decades, Logan, but it just now has become a reality that is now going to be the case. So you're right, that fortunately that has become, streamlined in terms of that approach. On the ACT, I do believe the state pays for the first one and will pay for a retake on the ACT exam, but I don't think the students, are we now doing where all students take it? Because I knew we made a shift, I thought like 2 years ago, where every senior had to take the ACT. Is that right, Penny?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
and-
everybody's required and you will pay for one retake, I think.
Yes, and I do know that districts at the beginning of every school year, or if a student moves into a district, will send home, it's just a required part of their intro to school, and parents have to fill that out for free and reduced. So I do know that goes out from the school districts.
I wonder if there's some language in there that we could use to support this FAFSA. If we could just cut and paste some of that similar kinds of language.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the ACT, unless something's changed and I haven't missed it, or SAT is a graduation requirement, Logan, to answer your question. So, you know, that was my approach with the state board when we began conversations, I think 3 years ago, about making the FAFSA also a graduation requirement.
Well, that would help students tremendously if it was a requirement and their admissions going forward. I love that idea. Any other recommendations or comments on the policies that are listed? Well, Penny, I think we're almost at the conclusion. Anything else that you need from us?
I don't. Just thank you. I know this has been an incredible amount of time for all of you, but it is so appreciated from the Department of Education.
Great job,
Thanks,
Yolanda.
Penny. Yeah, great job,
Thanks,
Yolanda.
Penny.
Thank you. Thanks, Penny.
Thank you. Thanks to you all. And I'm looking forward to getting the final results from all the subcommittee's hard work. And with that, if there's no further comments, that will conclude our meeting on today. Thanks, everyone, and stay warm.
Thank you
Bye,
all.
guys.
Take care.